How people thrived during the Great Depression, thriving through your circumstances. Hello, y'all. I'm Diana Brienne. You know, often people look at a crisis as only a horrible thing. No one wants to go through a crisis. No one. And I never welcome crises. And yet, when a crisis is imposed upon someone, I believe in doing the very best at turning that crisis around to that person's benefit. And so I got to thinking about the Great Depression. You know, we often think about the great stock market crash in 1929, and then there was, I think, another stock market crash a year or two later, or a couple years later, and that devastated people. People lost their homes, they lost their finances, they lost their cars, they lost their jobs, they lost their ability to provide for their family. But there were people that made money during that time, and they looked at that as an opportunity beyond just being a crisis. They realized it was a crisis, and they could either go down with that crisis or they could change their direction that they were taking and thrive during a crisis. So some people made a lot of decisions in capitalizing, so to speak, on that Great Depression. Now, that they weren't capitalizing at someone else's expense. They were capitalizing on a crisis that they didn't have a part of or play a part of, so that they could hopefully help other people in the process get through that crisis. And I think at that time, there's something called shorting the market. And, you know, shorting the market, I think, was what people did when they thought the market was going to go down. Now, I don't know enough about it to, you know, talk about it or anything like that, because you can lose money if the market goes up and you've shorted the market. You can lose all your money. So, but some of these people knew that they believed that, you know, the economy was falling apart at that time, and they felt that the stock market was going in that direction, and they made a lot of money. And like I said, I'm no expert at that, and I would not recommend that to anybody unless that person was skilled at it and knew what they were doing. But in other words, they made money during the Great Depression. Some people opened up businesses during the Great Depression that catered to people who were devastated by the Great Depression. A lot of people who held onto their money and hadn't invested in stocks at that point had taken their money and bought up properties that were selling for pennies on the dollar. You know, there can be ways through any kind of crisis that we can turn that crisis around for our advantage. Not just in the Great Depression, but it could be any kind of crisis one is facing. As I talked about in another video, when my husband went through cancer, I felt totally disempowered for a moment. And then I began to empower myself and saying, what can we do to get through this crisis? What can we do to thrive through this crisis? What can we do to create the miracle that we need? You know, I believe that God creates miracles, but he also gives us the tools to create those miracles. He gives us the wisdom, the knowledge, the ability to create those miracles. And so miracles can come totally divinely orchestrated without us doing anything. And yet I think most miracles come through knowledge, through God giving us the right knowledge, the wisdom to make the right choices and right decisions. And so during a crisis, we want to make right choices, right decisions. And we want to turn that crisis to our advantage if we can in any possible way. Now, you know, you might say, well, what was the advantage of my husband going through cancer? It was awful. But we came out of that journey. He's 100% cancer-free now. And he had terminal cancer, or he had end-stage cancer, I should put it that way. And we came out of that with a very clear perspective of how we wanted to go forward in our lives. So we took that crisis and we got everything that we could that was good from that crisis. Not only did we get through it, but we thrived again. He's out playing golf. He's enjoying life. I think all that much more now. He appreciates life so much more than he ever did. And I appreciate life more than we ever did. It changed us in a lot of positive ways. We were already positive people, but it changed us even more. It refined us even more. So we took that crisis and turned it into something that would create us to thrive. Whether it's a relationship problem. I know a woman whose husband walked out on her, or they're going through, a breakup. And if indeed they completely break up, she will begin more, if she empowers herself, she will begin a great life for herself. Maybe there were things in her own life that she needed to clean up. Maybe she needed to get fit and healthy and a more positive attitude and focus on other things. And if they go back together, they could thrive again if they choose to and take what they've learned from that experience and create a wonderful, wonderful marriage. There's been people that have gone through marriage crises where someone cheated, which is terrible. And yet they stayed together. And once they repaired that marriage, their marriages were actually better than they'd ever been. Now, I'm not recommending cheating because I think cheating is awful. It breaks trust, and people always remember it. And trust is never quite the same after that. And yet they have a relationship that is amazing today because they chose to take that crisis and find something good out of it. And that was difficult for them. And so whether it's the Great Depression, whether it's a health crisis, whether it's a relationship crisis, a career crisis, a job crisis, I know people that lost their job, and initially they felt totally disempowered until they began to believe in themselves, and they started getting new skills. They started refining their resumes. They started getting themselves ready for interviews, and they ended up getting a job that paid so much more and was so much better than their original job. They empowered themselves through a crisis. So instead of disempowering yourself through a crisis, empower yourself through a crisis, that you will thrive through the crisis, and after the crisis, you will thrive as well. From my house to yours, may God bless you. I hope you like, share, subscribe, and I hope to talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.